Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Please subscribe and keep watching more details. General Hospital spoilers. Sam's killer secretly attends funeral. General Hospital, GH. Spoilers reveal that Sam McCall's, Kelly Monaco, loved ones are still trying to figure out how to live without her. It's going to be a huge adjustment for Sam's friends and family members, but moving on is the only option. Of course, having a funeral is often an important part of letting go. The arrangements are already being made for Sam's service, so that could help the people she cares about on their path to healing. Alexis Davis, Nancy Lee Grahn, Christina Corinthos Davis, Kate Mansi, Molly Lansing Davis, Kristen Vaginos, Danny Morgan, Asher Antonisen, Scout Quartermain, Cosette Abinant, Dan DeFalconeri, Dominic Zamprogna, and many other PC residents will gather for a final farewell. We also have to consider the possibility that someone sinister could make an appearance. Will Sam's killer secretly attend her funeral? There's a good chance that Sam's fatal heart attack wasn't just some random tragedy. Sam was perfectly healthy and doing well following her surgery, so it seems more like she was targeted. We could buy the idea that Sam simply had an embolism, but that's not very soapy and wouldn't fit with another clue GH writers already provided. What was with Lulu Spencer's, Alexa Havens, ventilator getting messed with shortly before all the transplant drama? Since the show focused on that powered-down ventilator so much, we have to believe the mystery of who's behind it will be important. Cyrus Renault, Jeff Kober, makes the most sense considering he was in Lulu's room shortly before it happened. That could connect to buzz about Cyrus tampering with Sam's IV bag or doing something else to cause a sudden medical nosedive. It's possible that Cyrus was trying to help Lulu into the afterlife until he saw that she could be saved. From there, Cyrus might have decided Sam should take her sacrifice a step further, paving the way for Lulu to reunite with Dante down the road and truly get her life back on track. Then again, maybe there'll be some other motive behind Cyrus' potentially fatal plot. Regardless, Cyrus is an interesting suspect to mull over. Perhaps Cyrus could crash Sam's funeral while keeping a huge secret about his responsibility in her demise. On the other hand, Cyrus might lurk in the shadows until everyone's gone and ultimately make a confession at Sam's grave after her burial. Naturally, it's also possible that someone else entirely is to blame for killing Sam. Maybe even someone who seems innocent and hides in plain sight with the other mourners. No matter how it all plays out, our predictions point to some twists and turns when it comes to Sam's grim fate. General Hospital spoilers say Sam's funeral could lead to some shockers, so stay tuned for updates on all the stunning news to come. As the mist hung low over Port Charles Cemetery, friends and family gathered to pay their respects. The heavy air carried whispers, muted sobs, and the weight of a loss still fresh. Sam McCall stood near the front, her gaze fixed on the casket, but her mind was miles away. The man responsible for all this pain and loss was still out there. She gripped her coat tighter, trying to ward off the chill, both from the cold and from the sense of dread in her bones. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that her killer was closer than anyone suspected. The funeral proceeded somberly, and Sam felt the weight of every eulogy. As friends and family spoke of love, loyalty, and loss, Sam's thoughts turned to the twisted series of events that had brought them all here. It hadn't been a simple accident or a tragic illness. This was murder, cold and calculated. And though she told herself over and over that she'd move heaven and earth to find the person responsible, there was one terrifying truth that lingered in her mind. She already knew the killer. She hadn't said it aloud, hadn't dared to even acknowledge it until now. But as she scanned the crowd, her eyes lingered on faces she knew well, and one that she didn't. A figure stood at the back, half hidden by the thick foliage of an overgrown tree. They wore a wide-brimmed hat and a trench coat, blending into the shadows. But when Sam's gaze fell on them, she swore she saw the slightest smirk. Her pulse quickened. Could that be him? The man who'd upended her world, left her with sleepless nights, and haunted her dreams. Every instinct in her body told her to go, confront them, demand the truth. But she held back, watching from the safety of the distance, her heart pounding as the service continued. Beside her, Jason reached out, gripping her hand. His touch, usually so reassuring, felt cold today. He too sensed something amiss, his eyes scanning the crowd with that familiar intensity. They'd both been shaken, torn apart by the recent events. Jason had sworn to protect her, and yet even he had his limits. There was only so much he could do against an enemy they couldn't see or trace. After the final words were spoken, the guests began to disperse. Sam hung back, watching as the mysterious figure slipped away, blending effortlessly into the crowd. She felt Jason's hand tighten on hers, pulling her back into reality. "Sam," he said quietly, his voice a barely their murmur, "what is it?" She shook her head, not yet ready to share her suspicions. "I don't know, but there's something wrong. I feel like I need to figure it out on my own." Jason's eyes flashed with concern, but he knew better than to argue. Sam was headstrong and stubborn, especially when it came to her own mysteries. But that didn't mean he'd leave her to face it alone. Later that evening, Sam found herself back at her place, poring over clues she'd gathered in secret. She couldn't shake the image of the mysterious figure from her mind. Every instinct screamed danger, but she was also desperate for answers. The funeral had dredged up memories, old wounds, and unresolved questions. Sam knew she had to act soon, or risk letting her only lead slip through her fingers. Her phone buzzed, breaking her train of thought. It was a text from an anonymous number, the words chilling her to her core. "I'll see you soon, Sam." Her fingers tightened around the phone. How had he gotten her number? This wasn't just some faceless killer. This was someone who knew her, someone close. She sat down, racking her brain, trying to put pieces together. And then it hit her. She remembered the smirk, the figure slipping away from the cemetery. That face, it was so familiar. No, it couldn't be. Sam grabbed her coat, determined to find answers. She raced out of her apartment, her mind buzzing with a horrifying realization. If her suspicions were correct, then this wasn't just any killer. It was someone who had been in her life all along. Someone she had trusted, laughed with, confided in. And now that person had taken away someone she cared about. Under the cloak of night, Sam found herself drawn to a familiar, albeit quiet, corner of Port Charles. She knew where she had to go. A dilapidated warehouse near the docks. She'd been here before years ago, chasing another lead, another twisted villain. Now it felt like déjà vu. The warehouse was dark, silent except for the creaking of metal beams and the occasional drip of water echoing through the space. Her breath misted in the cold air as she took cautious steps inside, flashlight in hand. "Come out," she called, her voice steady despite the fear pulsing beneath the surface. "I know you're here. Show yourself." At first, there was only silence. Then a low chuckle echoed through the darkness, sending a chill down her spine. Well, a voice answered, smooth and taunting. "You've always been persistent, Sam. That's one of the things I admire about you." The figure stepped into the light, and Sam's breath caught in her throat. It was a face she knew all too well, but she'd never thought she'd see it twisted with such malevolence. "Why?" she whispered, barely able to form the words. "Why would you do this?" The killer smirked, tilting their head. "Because I could. Because, Sam, you're always so predictable." I knew you'd figure it out eventually. The question is, what will you do now that you know? Sam felt the weight of her options bearing down on her. She could run, but she'd never forgive herself. She could fight, but she wasn't sure she'd win. And then, with sudden clarity, she realized her only chance was to stall, to gather the strength to face her enemy head-on. They circled each other, predator and prey, waiting for the first move. But Sam had one last card to play. She'd made a call before coming here, a call to the one person she trusted most. Just as the killer advanced, footsteps echoed behind her. Jason stepped into view, his face a mask of controlled fury. "Game over," he said, his voice laced with cold finality. The killer's smirk faltered, a flicker of panic crossing their eyes. They made a move to run, but Jason was faster, closing the gap and pinning them to the wall. As the police sirens wailed in the distance, Sam felt a wave of relief wash over her. This nightmare was finally ending. She'd come face to face with her darkest fears, her greatest enemy. And with Jason by her side, she knew she'd be safe. As they watched the killer taken away, Sam let out a shaky breath, clinging to Jason for support. The road ahead would be hard, but at least now she knew who her enemy was, and that they'd pay for the devastation they'd caused. And as she and Jason turned to leave, she couldn't help but glance over her shoulder, feeling the weight of a story yet untold, a mystery that wasn't quite finished.